Hi, this is the Daily Overpass. My name is Eric and I make apps. Now today I want to talk about why you should add a margin to your quotes. Okay, so today I want to answer a question that came in last week from Shivan Pandy. Shivan, thanks again for another question. This is a bit of a long one. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's a personal question. He talks about a project that he's quoting for. It's his first client project, so he said 8 to 12 hours, and he was going to charge a certain amount, and he's wondering if it was too low or too much or too low. And I think I answered that I thought it was too low. I thought it was just a little bit too low, but that's just me, right? Because it was based on the time, right? And when I'm doing a quote, it always starts out based on the time. So that's the metric that as a developer you know most. So like once you get a feeling for the project and you scope it out as best as possible, you spec it out, and then you say, this should take me this will take me 10 days, right? This is a 10-day project, right? And then so then you would base your cost on that, and then you would add a margin. Now the margin would be the same way that you would add a margin if you were outsourcing the work. Let's say you weren't developing it at all, but you were outsourcing it to somebody else. You would want to have a margin in there so you don't get squeezed in the middle if something goes wrong, right? And you have to always remember that you are either quoting based on time or you're quoting a fixed price based on the project. So if you're doing it based on time, you don't need a margin, right? If it takes too long, it's on them. If it takes not long enough, that's on them. The client wins. If it takes longer than expected, then the client loses, you win, whatever. But but if you're doing fixed price, then it's on you to make sure that everything's done in the time possible. So, and I think there's 3 reasons why you'd want to add a margin onto that. And again, if you're looking for somebody to develop your app, this might not be something you want to hear, that you would add a margin onto the cost. In fact, I had one client. I had one client where I was so busy with a contract at the time, and I had this client and I had I had a team in India that was working on this project, and I was taking too long to come back with a quote because I'd got the quote back from the Indian company, but I hadn't added my markup. So I just said, and the guy was really chasing me, and I was in London, I was running all over the place. I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to send you what they sent, and I'll add my markup afterwards. And he goes, okay, great. So I sent it to him, right? And then I told him what my markup was. He goes, I can't believe the markup's that high, Eric. I don't understand this. I don't understand why it's that high, right? And I had to explain to him that it's going to require more of my time than he might anticipate, right? It's going to be, a lot of the times the quote that I get from the Indian company might not be as tight as necessary, or maybe they don't quite understand everything as much. The client could ask for more time, that kind of stuff. And in the end, it ends up me getting squeezed because the margin is too low, right? So I have to either keep saying no to everything or be really on everybody. So in the end we deliver a service that's not as good. So there's 3 reasons why I think you should add a margin, right? The first one is a margin for error, right? Every time you agree to a project, something magical happens where something will just go wrong. I don't know why this is, right? If you say something's going to take 4 hours and then you go to your computer, then that's when your computer's going to crash, or you're going to have to reboot it 10 times or whatever, right? There's always going to be something, and you have to, have some little buffer in there that if everything goes wrong, or your database crashes, or who knows what could happen. Or it might even be something that when you spec'd it out, I've had one client who kept getting the terminology between spreadsheet and database confused, so that we were talking cross purposes about something, and when I gave them the spec, they were just like, yeah, that looks good, right? And then found out it was wrong. And of course I could have been just like, nope, that you agreed to the spec, you got to do that. But in the end it had to be fixed, and luckily my margin can handle that, right? Secondly, you have to have a margin for scope creep. Scope creep always happens, right? I know this is the kind of thing, if you talk to project managers, they say, nope, no scope creep, right? We're going to play good cop, bad cop. We're going to say, before the project, we'll say, yes, we can help you, we can do all this, yes, 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 I love you, I love you, I love you, we'll do your project. And then once you get the project, you're like, no changes, we're not doing anything. In fact, once you sign this thing, there's going to be no changes, right? And it's really hard to get a job that way, because, or to get the project that way, is because they don't want to actually agree to anything because it's too risky, right? They don't want to commit if they're not going to be able to make a little tweak here and there. So you have to allow a little bit for scope creep, which means you have to add a margin. I mean, you don't put this on the invoice, by the way. You don't say, this part's for margin. No, you have to just make sure it's in there, right? So, like, say if they come back and say, I want to change the background color from this to this, or I want to change the font, or there's this little functionality change that was there, or my favorite, actually no, my least favorite thing to hear is like, I was showing this to my friend and they had this great idea, right? So, and sometimes the scope creep is too big and you're just like, no, I'm sorry, we can't. That will have to come in version 2, or we're gonna have to start again, or start over again and everything like that. So, but there's always going to be some scope creep, and I think it's like death, taxes, and scope creep, right? And you could either be the person who always says no, or you could be the person who says maybe. We'll evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. But if you don't have a margin, then there's nothing you could do. And the third reason to have a margin is just to add more value, right? So, there's going to be times where your client's going to want to have meetings with you. They're going to want to discuss things. They're going to want to bring up their concerns, and all of that time it costs money. It's not just like, here's your project, everything's done, no more talking, right? And there might be some little bit of support you have to do afterwards. You might have to help them out with certain things, or even just give them a regular summary of how things are going, right? So you want to be able to first, not be super stressed out because the project is going late, or you're being squeezed because you have no margin and you're actually losing money on the project. You want to be able to confidently do the project and get it done in the time allocated. So you have to make sure when you figure out, and it's not like an exact science. So sometimes it can be 10% margin, sometimes it can be 20, 30%. It depends on the client, and a lot of times when you're meeting with the client, you have to make the evaluation of how difficult this is gonna be. And sometimes you could do a quote for somebody, and then while you're doing the quote, while you're working on it, they will change their mind 3 or 4 times. And you think, well, this is gonna be interesting, right? Either you turn down the project, or you put a bit more margin in there because you think, already we haven't even started yet, and there's been 3, hey, I just had another great idea kind of thing, which is annoying, but it happens, right? So anyway, Shivam, that's my advice to you. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I think, if you cannot provide enough margin that you could give them a good service so that they're as happy at the end of the project as they were at the beginning of the project, then you're not doing anybody any good, right? And if you're not getting paid enough to actually get it done, then they might feel like they're getting a bargain, but in the end they'll get bad service because you'll be stressed out and not doing your best, and then nobody wins. So anyway, that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.